fan and have always just been really impressed with her presence, with her business, but also with her ability to really like whenever I watch Association Chat, I think not only do you have amazing guests, like you're amazing, but also I think there's the chemistry that you somehow managed to create with your speakers. So thanks so much for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was so nice. I want to cry.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I listen and I think she's making everybody interesting. I wonder if everyone's that interesting. And I know that they are, but somehow you're making them, super interesting. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. Here are a few administrative details. So we're recording this and we'll send you a link to the slides and the recording within the next 48 hours. If you do have problems during this webinar, call our main line and we'll get you set up with someone who can help you. If you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And I've got Brian, who is actually monitoring this, and I've got Leah, who's monitoring this, so they'll let us know if there are questions. And then if you have questions or comments, give us some love on social, or you can, we'll have our contact information at the end, and we hope that you'll reach out. So, and if you want to give us some love on social, use the hashtag.
Oh, definitely. Give us some love.
Yeah, definitely. So, for those of you who know Matrix Group, thanks so much for joining. For those of you that do not know Matrix Group, I'm Joanna Pineda. I'm CEO and Chief Troublemaker here at Matrix Group, and we're a digital agency based out of Arlington, Virginia, although today I have no idea where my staff actually are. I was actually in California for 4 weeks, and these are the problems that we help associations solve: increase their membership, increase membership retention, reach new audiences with a clear brand. But we're also known as a kind of just a good development shop for, wrangling all those back office systems and creating all those integrations, as well as creating custom systems. Here are our services. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them, but I'll talk in a second about our virtual meeting platform because that's the really hot thing right now. But it all starts out with your strategy, and really it's a whole combination of design, development, hosting, and analytics. What I'm excited about right now is sometime late spring, we announced our new virtual meeting platform called the eSpeak, and it is a virtual meeting platform that really allows us to create very beautiful and very tailored virtual events for our clients. And I'll tell you, or won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but I'll tell you the thing that we're really trying to solve for with eSpeak is the connections between people. So sure, we can give you the sessions, sure, we can give you the live streams and the meeting rooms, but really what we're trying to solve for is the connections between people, the connections between the attendees and speakers, exhibitors, sponsors, and attendees through actually live video meetings. So if you're interested, love to have a conversation with you about how we can help your meeting be really beautiful, but also very meaningful, and really bring the people back into your meetings. We've got a demo coming up on the 29th. So KiKi, just a little bit about you.
Yes. Okay. So, I wear many hats, like all of us do in the association world. And one of the hats that I wear is a CEO of Amplified Growth. And Amplified Growth, I focus on digital strategy, primarily social media and SEO strategy. And what I've been getting into is training folks on how to prepare their speakers to look better on their virtual meetings. This year is something, it's provided an opportunity. Yes, we've all been facing these challenges, for me to sort of expand into this area. And so when I would normally be talking about connecting to people from a stage in front of people, I'm talking now about connecting to people through using technology. So that's been exciting. Now, Association Chat is probably the thing that I'm known the most for. And Association Chat started 11 years ago now, as a hashtag that I like to joke is the most pornographic sounding hashtag out there. If you ever see hashtag #AssinChat,
right,
that's really the hashtag. It's been the hashtag for 11 years. We're not doing away with it. But that's Association Chat, and it's really just a wonderful group of people who come together to talk about association industry related topics, and has a private Facebook group that you can join, a website that has great content on all the time, and a podcast. So I interview people weekly and add them to the audio and video podcast that you can check out on YouTube, and you can also listen to on any podcast channel.
Yeah, and I do want to plug Association Chat. I try to listen in as often as I can. The one that you did with Mo Rocca was amazing. He's so funny. And then I love the one that you did with, and I'm forgetting her name. She was the Chief Learning Officer from ASAE, talking about annual and the decisions that they made. That was so fabulous. So thank you for all of that.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the topic of the day. Many of us are planning virtual meetings, and we know that your speakers in many ways are really kind of the heart and soul. They're often the reason why people come to your conferences. So these are all the things we're going to be talking about, and we're going to get right to it. So I'm going to set the scene. Right. So almost all of my clients these days are saying, okay, we've got to turn our events virtual, or in some cases, we actually have some clients that are creating new events. And they're saying, you know, there's an opportunity for us to, you know, do something a little bit different. And so, and they know that the education often is the draw. And, you know, KiKi, you say, look, the virtual world is different. If in the olden days you would say, here's our conference, and we're going to have this type of a speaker for the keynote and this type of a speaker for the breakouts. What you're saying is it's different. So how's it different? Like, why can't we book just the same types of people and give them the same type of training?
Well, if you think about it, you know, your speakers who may have had many, many years of using their skills and their talents in engaging audiences from a stage live or working the room, and they're just hugely interactive and they feed off that energy. I'm hearing the same thing from speakers, from coaches, from facilitators. And for those of us who really use that energy to help guide us and really take cues from the nonverbals of the audience, this has been a very disruptive time in the way that we do our business, the way that we conduct business. And what I'm hearing from them is that, you know, a lot of them are having to adapt. Some are doing better than others. Now, some people, this has been an opportunity to show that they have strengths in presenting to people through the camera, through webcam. And definitely for the folks who have that sort of tech savvy ability to adapt quickly and to engage through technology, they've been able to turn that into a great asset for themselves right now, and also an asset to all of the participants in any of these online events, because it makes a difference between someone who feels like they're prepared, who feels like they can engage, even if they're talking, you know, through a webcam, versus somebody who feels disconnected and just really can't figure out how to connect with the audience using technology. And, you know, a lot of that goes, a lot of that comfort level and that ability to engage comes from the production side of things, like how prepared they are. And the other side has to do with how prepared they are for the performance part of it. And really that's the connection piece using technology.
Right. Awesome. Well, I mean, you know, I think some organizations think, okay, well, these are the speakers I've booked for my canceled meeting.
Yeah.
And if it's somebody who maybe you're paying a lot of money for, and you think, well, they're just going to go out on stage, it's not necessarily the case, right?
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, maybe a few people who are listening to this have experienced this, but, you know, they have somebody that is reliable, someone that they've heard before, someone that they've seen on stage, and they're like, oh, they're so phenomenal, they're a rock star. And then they show up and they don't show up. You know, they try to show up, there's a problem, there's a disconnect, there are all these issues. And there's really what happens is that we're discovering that just because somebody is a fantastic speaker doesn't mean that they're always really well prepared for your platform, for the show flow. They're not necessarily prepared for the engagement. And so the meeting planner and the speaker, there really has to be a closer relationship and more communication there, because in the past, maybe you could get by with the way that things usually go, because as long as they show up on stage, they're going to knock it out of the park every time. Now we don't, that's not necessarily a sure thing. And in fact, it's probably a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the different speaker types that you might have at a conference, you've got a plenary session where that tends to be kind of, you know, the big name speaker up on a stage. And then there's the breakout session, you know, who's usually a subject matter expert. And then you've got these other folks who really support them. They might be the discussion facilitators or the moderators. They've got different roles to play. Mm-hmm. And even, I mean, I was talking to a client who said, you know, I think we're all kind of zoomed out. Here I am doing another Zoom webinar, but, you know, where it all kind of looks the same, you know, where the people kind of close up. And so the question is, how do you create different types of experiences, and how do you kind of bring your speakers along? So I know we did a conference this week, and we had a couple of folks who were doing the plenaries, and these were folks who were just incredible speakers. But we really needed to hold their hand, KiKi, because it was a different type of technology. They're like, oh my God, every time I do this, it's a different tech, right? Sometimes, I mean, like, I got to do this. I need, you know, I can't use my Mac. I got to use this. And, you know, depending on the time of day, I got to think about my lighting. So we had one speaker who was in Australia, and she said, oh God, it's going to be the middle of the night. I got to think about my lighting. So we got to think about all these things.
Yeah, and we also have to think about the plan B, the plan C, the plan D, you know, because you know, the old joke about technology, the more technology you have, the more certainty you have that something will go wrong. With all of us, with our independent systems, you know, I've been talking to more and more people who, to control the quality, they're sending out the actual equipment to all of their speakers so that the speakers all have a ring light. They all have the same webcam. They all have the same microphone and the same headphones or earbuds. And the reason why is so that they can, and the hotspot, so that they can try to control as much as possible the quality of the programming and the quality of the feed that they have. And the truth is, even with all of that, there are still many, many things that can go wrong. So it's a lot of expense being put into this. And I think that everyone's kind of looking for, you know, what's the tried and true, what's the best way forward? And I've seen a few things that can work really well. One thing that, you know, no matter what your budget is, will always work, though, is being able to prepare as much as possible, communicating with your speakers and really going through, you know, that list of things that they need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about, you know, just speaker considerations. No matter who the speaker is, these are the things to think about, right? So the first thing is the contract, and you and I, you know, spent some time talking about that. Sometimes you can't assume that the person who is going to be your keynote in Hawaii will actually do a virtual event for you. So they might say, that gives me the right to refuse, right? Or sometimes if they say, yes, I'll do it, they may not be willing to do the same type of things for you. They might say, okay, yes, I'll do this for you, but you can't record it. Or I won't be on the chat, or there can't be chat, or it's got to be only me. Or I mean, like, basically what you're saying is, like, look at the contract and see kind of what your options are.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, you can't be sure of anything if you sign the contracts earlier on, before a lot of this. Now that we're further along, you know, hopefully you have been revising your contracts and you've been making sure that
KiKi, what should be in those contracts these days?
Oh, I would make sure that, of course, you want to make sure that the way that you use the content later, this is something that should have always been included, but now because this is primarily digital and we're going to be having a lot of more uses for the video and the audio down the road, you want to make sure that you can use that you've got their permission to use it, that it can be modified once you've recorded it and continue to be released with their permission. That's one of the things that you want to make sure is on there. The other thing is you need them to agree in the very beginning that they're going to go through these steps with you to check their system.
Do a practice session.
Yes, do the practice session. You need to be able to look at the materials and go through things ahead of time for those of us who were, familiar with the days of, well, and I was guilty of this too, very guilty of this. In fact, I was making changes to the slideshow, the slide deck today before we went live. But, you want to get the bulk of what is going to be the content reviewed ahead of time. And you want to be able to have people agree that they're going to show up for their deadlines. They're going to show up for their tests. They're going to go through and check the platforms. Because one thing that I've seen pretty regularly, and it's been on just every platform out there, is that people think that they can log in 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before, and it will all connect and work, and they'll figure it out. And, Zoom is not, Intrado is not, Streamyard is not, they're all very, very different. And so it's so critical that the speaker, even if it takes time from everyone, that there is that time for them to go and become familiar with the platform ahead of time. And the only way you can assure that you're going to be able to do that is to make sure it's in the contract, so that them getting paid, part of that is that they've already agreed that they're going to do this test run with you.
So, and I find that you need that in the contract for the big names, but if it's one of your volunteers, they're probably much more interested. They're saying, hey, when am I going to do the training? Versus, like you said, with some of the folks who normally aren't, are doing this stuff with you. Now, KiKi, you say there are actually some certifications now available for the big names, and you and I probably attended a couple where you're like, yeah, this might have been great live, but this somehow didn't have the polish, the sparkle, or the speaker was sideways, and
yes,
the speaker was like this.
Yeah, so ESpeaker, they've actually had something in place for a while before COVID-19 hit, where people could go in and they could show that they were tech savvy, basically. But there wasn't a real drive for people to do it like there is now. And one of the big things that ESpeakers offers now is this ability to get this certification. To get this certification, speakers have to go in and they have to show up, operate the technology, show that their webcam, their sound quality, their lighting, everything is working. But beyond the technology side of it, they have to show that they know how to speak into the camera, that they can be engaging, and they're rated on a number of these different items. And then if they pass, then they're able to share that they're certified, they've got this badge. And when you hire them, you know for sure that they're familiar with the technology, that they've gone through some kind of, some sort of framework that says, okay, yeah, you know what you're doing with technology, and I can trust that you're going to show up and do a good job for us. And so ESpeakers, they have a listing of people who have this certification, but I would definitely check and look for that, because that's a real benefit right now, is if somebody has that, then...
KiKi, are the big names doing this?
Yeah, yes, they are. And that's actually, one of the people that I'll say is just amazing. She's amazing for so many reasons, but Beth Ziznesis, I can never say her name right, Beth Z, fabulous speaker, always on top of technology, but she's really embraced learning about the technology for your home studio setup, and has done a phenomenal job with setting up her own studio. And so she is regularly talking about, what speakers can do to up their game, since she's a speaker. That's 100% of what she does is she's out there speaking all of the time. So she had to adapt quickly. And she's one of the people that I know was talking about ESpeakers.
Wow.
Their digital speaker certification.
So really, for the keynotes, and these presenters are a little bit different. You're saying, look, ahead of time, you got to provide them with information on the platform. It's going to be live. Is this going to be pre-recorded? And then you got to get the tech right. And KiKi, I think, when I see the different types of keynotes these days at conferences, sometimes it could be as simple as a Zoom-like experience like this. And then other times they try to mimic the keynote experience where it's more a full body video. They're clearly being filmed on a stage. So who decides that? Like, who decides what kind of, video format it's going to be? Is that you? Is it in conjunction with the speaker and their agent? Like, how does that work?
Well, sometimes it can be a combination. So a lot of times, certain speakers, they have figured out how to modify their presentations, and they even have a set. They know how to present, doing their bit virtually, and they can even have camera people. They have their whole setup ready to go, and that's just part of what their presentation is. And so they're going to say, this is what it's going to look like, and they're going to present that to you. I think a lot more often it ends up being something where, especially if you're looking at dealing with a lot of different speakers, I think, probably the norm is that people are just going to try to match whatever it is that the host or the one holding the event, what their platform is using, and it's probably going to be a setup very similar to this. I have seen where sometimes there's a request for everyone to have the same background, using a green screen, and that the background is something that unifies all of the speakers. But primarily I've seen where people are usually pretty stationary. I'm going to tell you though, I have seen where some people have been venturing out and testing the waters with standing while they're presenting. And I have to say,
I'm thinking of doing that for my next thing, where I'm thinking of projecting the slides on my big TV, and then I'll stand in front of the TV and use, like my video camera to film it, so that then it looks more like a keynote experience.
Yeah, I think you have
Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy, and you're just, I think that you're ahead of the game in trying to do that. I will say that it takes some forethought. So this is definitely not one of those, well, let's set it up and then we'll just wing it and roll through it when it happens,
right.
Because it's harder than it looks. And you're going to run into things that you never really considered. Like, for example, is the awkward, let me turn this off over here. Okay, now I'm ready. Is that going to be okay? Do you have transition time?
Right.
It comes back to communication and coordination between the meeting planner, the event planner, and the speaker.
So I'm keynoting a conference in October, and I'm going to practice over the next couple of weekends. It might just end up being Zoom like this with slides, but I'm thinking of, like I said, projecting the slides onto my big TV, me standing next to the TV, and then I'm going to have the slides on a laptop in front of me. I have the slides, and then I'm thinking of having my son do the video recording and then have the video pipe into the Zoom, so that then it looks, it's going to look like my living room, but it looks more like a keynote experience.
I think it's more exciting. We do have to start thinking about how many of these setups can we deal with, honestly. Now, everyone, I actually want to see you type into the chat. If you're watching this right now, type into the chat and tell us, do you want to see more people sitting in the middle of the frame like this, or would you like to see a little variety, a little movement,
that's a good point.
Trying new things, right?
And the reason why I'm thinking of doing it is I feel like if it's the keynote, it needs a visual differentiation. But I don't know. We'll see. It'd be interesting to see, what people have to say in the chat. By the way, we got a question, and one question was, hey, can you provide, either a sample speaker contract or some considerations for the contract? We can definitely follow up with that.
Yeah,
and then there's another question about, hey, can you give us some tips for working with breakout speakers? And we have that coming up next. So actually, why don't we go ahead and talk about that? Because, all right, so breakout session presenters.
Yeah.
Now, what I find with this is, one, you're going to have more of them, right? So what you probably want to do is, you might have 12 of them, you might have 30 of them, you might have, 40 of them, is you want to do some general training, but you want to make sure that there's an opportunity for some one-to-one if you feel like maybe a couple of them need some extra support. At least that's been my experience. I think, like you said, over communicate, give them tons of information on the platform, give them tips for making their presentations compelling, practice with them, or have them practice within the platform if it's a different platform. Tech checks and clearly communicated expectations. And I think that, there's a little bit more of them, so you probably can't give them the same attention, but I still think they need it, right? Like, because every single one of those breakouts could be the session that really makes the conference for your attendees. Do you have any other tips for the breakouts?
Well, I would say, building on that, I think it could be the breakout that makes the conference for the attendees. It could be the session that does it in for the attendees. And they're like, I'm out of here if this is a sample of what's going on, And so, I think that this is such an important point, because the breakout session, we've all been in those breakout sessions where we say, I hope at this point in our lives, where we say, oh my gosh, that was worth every penny of why I'm here. Absolutely. That was worth the whole conference. And it's not that it has to be an hour long or something like that. That's another thing, format. I've been hearing so much about, can we please have 20 minutes? Can we please have, why does everything have to be 60 minutes long? But I think that it's so important to not just focus on the keynotes, not just focus on those big names and making sure that they've gone through and they know what's going on. But your breakout session leaders, they need to be able to know what kind of engagement are we going to have? How's the Q&A going to run? Is there going to be a Q&A? Is there going to be a chat? Like Terry says over here, I want to be on that Zoom with NKOTB, and it's, and I love that, new kids on the block, dating myself. But it's that kind of thing. Like, is there going to be engagement? Is there going to be some way to interact with folks? Or is it going to be something where there is no chat? There's a moderated Q&A at the end. Is there going to be an intro? Is there going to be an outro? Who's going to tell everybody where to go next? All of these things are so important.
Yeah, you have to design the whole experience.
You have to know, you have to design the whole experience. And oh my gosh, please tell the presenters, empower them to be better for you, empower them to do the best for themselves and for their audience, because, everybody wants the same thing. We all want to do great. Everybody wants to do great. We want to be in great sessions. We want to present great sessions. We want to have successful presenters of great sessions so that people come back to our event. And so we have to communicate, over communicate, and make sure people know.
And give them tips, right? Because we don't know that this is, like I'm a pretty seasoned presenter at this point, and so are you, but someone who's maybe not presented before. Needs tips. And I'll tell you, I mean, you and I have been doing a lot of these virtual conferences, and I did one where I was the only speaker. And so in person, that would have been fine. I would have been interacting with the audience, but I had a staff person who was going to do the introduction. And the first thing I said was, let's not read the boring introduction, because that's the fastest way to drain the energy from the room. So I said, how about saying these 2 punchy sentences about me and then be done with it? And so that's my first tip for these breakouts. The second thing is, I actually asked, she said, okay, I'm going to take myself off video and I'm going to leave the room and it'll just be you. And I actually said, can you stay in the room? Because even though I do this all the time, talking to myself is no fun. Right. And it's odd, right? So like this webinar is so much more fun because you and I are having a conversation.
It is. I know. I was looking forward to it just because, I was like, oh, it's going to be like hanging out and just talking about stuff. Which
so
is, by the way,
let me just say this. If it's just you, then you're like, it feels kind of weird. You're just talking. You don't even have anyone to look at. So I said to this person, I said, well, can you just stay on camera so at least I have someone to look at? And she said, sure. So maybe think about, for these breakouts, think about having 2 people in more of the breakouts, because I think it becomes a better experience for the attendees. Plus for the speakers, now they've got someone to banter with.
Well, and that is such a good point, because I think because people are thinking of it being, okay, the speaker logs in on their laptop and we're doing this all virtually. Maybe we have somebody who is, operating a switcher somewhere and moving from one session to another. it's that with having a little bit more human interaction to add interest.
Yes.
Because I mean, we all know what it's like to sit through a webinar or even give a webinar and not have any kind of interaction. And where's the energy coming from? You're
Absolutely.
just like trying to read the room, and it's so hard. And I don't know about you, but I like have ended webinars before where I don't know how it landed. I don't know what people thought. I hope it went well, but you're just like trying so hard to generate this energy, and you're not getting any kind of feedback.
You have no idea.
Right. And so I think that that's definitely something that we cannot underestimate or undervalue, is that need to have some kind of feedback, interaction, any kind of human interaction that's going to make things a little more dynamic. By the way, people don't just want to hear my voice. They get bored after, and it's not just me, I don't think. It's just musically, if you think about one certain tone, you don't want to hear that same tone for an hour. It's good to have variety. So
hey, KiKi, we got a question, which was the eSpeaker certification. Is that appropriate for breakouts, or is that more for the plenaries? Is it cost prohibitive? I have no idea. What does that thing cost? Do you know?
It's not, it's actually really not super expensive to do. So if you were thinking about, maybe it could be like a member benefit, and it's something that's included in training and giving something back to your speakers saying, hey, while you're at it, you can go through this training and we're going to cover it. And you're going to become, that might be something, if you have, say you have board members or volunteers who regularly speak at your events, that might be worth looking into, just because it would help them and would also help you. But it's actually not super cost prohibitive. I think
we can provide that data in the follow-up.
Yeah, we can provide that data in the follow-up, and definitely eSpeakers. I know that if you make even, approaching a quarter of your revenue in speaking, or know someone who does, I think it's definitely worth your time in exploring it. And I think any speaker should probably be thinking about it, just because. I mean, I've thought about doing it just so I can check that box and say,
let's you and I do it, KiKi, and then we can
let's do it. Let's do it. I think it's a great idea.
All right. So we have these resources that we're going to share with folks afterwards. We'll get these to you. We've got a tips and tricks when recording. So we know that many of you will ask your breakout presenters to record their sessions. I actually was in a meeting this morning with a client, and they said, well, I think most of their presenters will just use Zoom to record it and then provide them with the track or with the video. And then we're also going to do speaker tips and tricks for recording. So we've got lots of resources for you that we're going to send out afterwards. So KiKi, we also say that even facilitators and moderators need training, and we never think about them, right? And I'll tell you, there's a conference that I speak at every year, and they always assign someone who's a moderator. And I have been a moderator, and this organization gives lovely, lovely guidance to the moderators. They say, reach out to the person that you're introducing, give them a call, ask them how they want to be introduced, and then have coffee with them before they talk.
Love that.
I love it. And so what happens is, as a speaker, I feel cared for, right? And as a moderator, I feel like I'm kind of contributing to the conference as well, but it also means that the day of the conference, to say, was a guy named, I think there was a guy named Josh, and he specifically reached out to me and said, hey, the day before, let me buy you coffee. And so we had a nice little chat. And then, the morning of the conference, he walks in early and he says, I'm here. What can I get you? You're all set. And it was just already, there was a friendly face. And I just felt cared for as a speaker, and the organization didn't have to spend any extra money. So I think you can do that virtually too, right? Tell your moderators, please be in touch with your speakers. Have them ask your speaker how they want to be introduced, and have them say, how can I support you during this session?
I think it's really great advice. I wish that first of all, I wish that more moderators and facilitators were empowered ahead of time to do that. Sometimes they don't even have the contact information for the people that they're supposed to be moderating ahead of time. And so that's one thing that you can definitely do when you're planning to set someone up for success, is to say, let's introduce everyone. Here's your information. Please feel free to contact each other ahead of time.
Absolutely.
I also think you're right. I think that, the moderators to reach out ahead of time to make people feel comfortable and to get to know them. I mean, this is actually, a moderator has an enormous job that is more than just asking questions. It's really about creating a through line sometimes, looking for the themes and
Yes,
tying things together. And that's something that goes beyond just presenting a piece of information. Right. And so, and when you're grabbing, questions from the audience and you are engaging with them and then tying it into what's been said, that requires attention. That requires a lot of forethought about the topics at hand. It requires kind of a baseline knowledge about the things that you're going to be talking about. And, I have to say that, I think a lot of work goes into making that look easy for the people who do it really well. And, I'm going to say, Dave Coryell, I've watched him in action and he's just masterful at doing this, I think.
Yeah, terrific.
But, and that's Dave Coryell from Delcor, for those of you who don't know. But, I'll say this, if you could at least prod your facilitators, prod your moderators ahead of time and say, this is what we're hoping, from our moderators, that we're hoping that they do. It might lead them down the right path. Also giving them some tips or a checklist of things that they might consider doing. If you don't just straight out say, this is what we expect from the role of moderator for these sessions. And I think that when that doesn't happen, Joanne, I think it's actually, it may not be because anybody, wants to, is purposefully avoiding it. I think it's that more that they don't know. And so if you tell a lot of people who are given that moderator role how they can excel, I think a lot of times you'll be surprised that they will.
Yeah, and I think, I would add two things. One is make sure that the moderators are also really knowledgeable about the platform. Yeah. So that they'll know. So you'll say, okay, your job as the moderator is to monitor the chat. So for this webinar, for example, I've got Brian monitoring the chat. So I'm probably going to say at some point, Brian, how are we doing, the questions? And he'll say, I've got 2 questions. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, to your point, a really experienced moderator can kind of cull through the questions, combine them if needed, and then add commentary and say, ooh, KiKi, we've got a lot of chatter here about X. And so talk about that and maybe even paraphrase the question because it's been, asked 3 ways. Yeah. The last thing I would say is arm your moderators with 3 questions ahead of time that they can ask the speaker, because what'll happen is the presentation will end and the speaker will say, right, now we've got time for a few questions. And moderator will say, great. Now, it'll take time for the questions to bubble up if you haven't been asking for questions the whole time. So what I say is, have them be ready. So if I were moderating a session for KiKi, I'd say, great, I want to see those questions in the chat. KiKi, I got my first question for you. I'm already ready, right? So that then you don't have these awkward pauses. KiKi, should your hair be purple or should it be blue? And then you're immediately go into it. And while KiKi's answering the question, I'm looking at the conversation. So I think, like you said, a good moderator, especially if they have some knowledge, can also then comment on the questions and say, ooh, it sounds like da-da-da-da, here's my experience. KiKi, what about you? So I think and then it makes for really great rapport between the speakers.
Yeah, I think so too. I also think, because moderators are then put in the role of being sort of MC for the moment or the person in charge for the moment, if you have where does everyone go after this session? What do they do once they break from here? Where can people connect with each other? The little housekeeping items that a lot of times, if we were meeting in person, that somebody might come into the room to say at the end, you need to be able to give them that, because what will happen is that people are going to say, oh, this person's in charge. They know the answer to what I'm supposed to do next. And so they'll say, well, where do we go next? And they'll ask those questions. And you want to give the moderator. Yeah. And then the moderator, I've seen it where they just have no idea, because at the end of their session, as far as they know, screen goes black and it's the end of it. Yeah, they go on with their day. So you definitely want to give them that information, even if they don't have to, like, even if somebody ends up coming on and saying it, plan B, right? Because maybe that person can't connect. What happens if you can't connect? You need to give them the information that they need to have to help people out for that next step.
All right, I'm gonna keep us moving because we got a lot of content. So let's just, geez, KiKi, we could be here all day. So we just wanted to show you a common platform these days for these live streams, not Zoom, is Streamyard. You're a big fan of Streamyard, so am I. Walk us through this quickly.
All right, so really quickly, what you'll see is on the bottom left corner, there's a little tiny window. And that was just where I was before going live. Now, if you have guests that come on, there would be another little window next to it. And then you could then click on each one, and in the main window, both people would be on the screen, but until you hit live, that's your green room. And people would be able, you'd be able to talk with the guests, or then choose to deselect them and have their window go back down.
And KiKi, the most important thing here, I think, is if you're using a platform like this, is you have to practice ahead of time.
You have to practice ahead of time. Yeah, for your own good, but especially for the people who aren't familiar with the platform itself. So, yeah. So yeah, and this is an example of what it looks like. On the bottom right is an example of what it looks like in StreamYard when you have your guest who is on, and you can talk with them ahead of time and set everything up ahead of time before you go live. So
I'll tell you when I'm sorry, go ahead, I interrupted.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to say it looks live, but until you actually go live, you're able to talk with them and kind of get a feeling for what it's going to look like. And then just really quickly, the top left is what the green room looks like in the Crowdcast platform, which is another one that's undergone a lot of changes since back in the day, and continues to make changes. So.
Yeah, you know, I just want to say, for those of you who are considering live, I really like StreamYard because visually it looks different than a Zoom. It's really good looking. Like you see here, you can have a background, you have two people side by side, you can have a bottom thirds, you can have branding. So we're really big fans. All right, so.
You can also, what I found out recently is that, so I recently got approved for LinkedIn Live, which is really exciting because rather than having to post my video to LinkedIn later, I can stream live. It only took 3 applications. But they have a listing of the platforms that they'll work with, right? And StreamYard's one of them. They don't work with all of the platforms. Right. So if you ever think about getting approval to stream live to LinkedIn Live, it's interesting to see that there's only a select number that they work with.
Hey, so for this next thing, I'm just going to breeze through this. And since we're talking about the speakers, what we want you to do is really just think about how tight is the schedule for your speakers. If you've got someone who's like we had a conference on Monday, and this poor guy, he was like, basically, he was one of the keynotes, and then he was moderating a couple sessions. So his day was very tight. I mean, we felt like he just basically lived in the green room. And I said at one point, like, you're going to have to get lunch delivered to this guy. So just think about that. Think about the amount of time your speakers are on. Think about time zones, and think about how tight your schedule is for slip ups and overages. And think about what you're going to do if you have like, if someone ends early, it's almost never a problem. But if someone goes long, it can have a cascading effect on your program. And then what's that going to do to your speaker? So my tip here is, and we're gonna share this resource with you. What we work with our clients to do when we're planning these virtual meetings is we work with them so that every speaker has their own sheet. And it's got, here are your expectations, here's where you go, and here's minute by minute what the schedule is, and then contact information. So it'll say, all right, be in here by 9:45. At 10 o'clock, you're going to go live. At 10:05, this is going to happen. At 10:15, this is going to happen. And then, you know, again, there's contact information.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what I'm going to say, as we're going into tech checks, this is perfect. you know, working in those breaks is so critical, because even for yourself, even, you know, when we're looking at scheduling for our own days, we need to work those breaks in, because, you know, I don't know about you, but it's like, oh my gosh, back to back Zoom meetings. And you're like, when am I ever going to just run to the bathroom? Like, I just need, like, let me please get up, you know? And so, you know, if somebody's like 5 minutes late to their Zoom meeting, I think that we understand. But if you think about some of these long conferences, or if you're even doing something like, I work with Techer International, and when we end up having a meeting, it's like a board meeting, those things can go pretty long, right? You've got to work in the break so that people just have a chance to like get up and stretch their legs.
All right, so then we're going to talk a little bit about the physical, and okay, we got 13 minutes.
Yeah.
So for your speakers, the question is, are they working with the camera on their laptop, or are they working with an external camera? And again, you want to talk to them, put it in your, you know, in your guidelines, and practice with them. Like, I know, for example, we were doing a test and I was testing out an external camera, and it actually wasn't better. So I switched back to the camera, you know, on my laptop. And then KiKi, I got to play with like using the, you know, the DSLR. And then you got to check the sound, right? So you've got a microphone. I've got an external speaker. Some people prefer headphones. Whatever it is, make sure that your speakers have good quality sound. You're coming in beautifully. I hope I'm coming in beautifully, because there's nothing worse than speakers who don't come in clear.
Yes.
And then what happens is you get, it might be amazing content, but you'll get really crappy reviews because of the sound. And sometimes you can't, you know, affect that because somebody went in and out because of their internet. And then, you know, the last thing is just, you know, if you've got a conference with a lot of speakers, then you're giving them guidance. Hey, make sure you've got a fast connection, be wired if you can, you know, all that stuff. Try not to compete with, you know, with other people in your household. How realistic is that these days? But I'll tell you, we had a situation on Monday where we had two people who were moderating, and one guy was like, it'll be fine. I'm going to go to the NYU campus and I'll be in my office and the internet's going to be great. He did a tech check and it was totally awesome. And then the other moderator was like, uh-oh, I'm in my vacation home in Taos, New Mexico, and I'm on satellite. And we were really worried about him. And it was the NYU guy.
Right. I mean, that's kind of the way that it goes. I mean, that's, you know, I also feel like that's kind of 2020 for you, but
that's true.
But it is so true. You know, it's like you need to do those tech checks. And I think, you know, one thing that I really want to get across to everyone is that what you said about the sound quality is so important. And this is whenever you're thinking about where your lights are set up or your camera or anything, remember that the first and foremost, people need to understand you. And part of how people understand the speaker is by being able to see their face, see their expressions, and to be able to connect with them and hear them. So we're really thinking about using everything that we need to communicate. And if any of that is hindered, then we have a problem. So, you know, content is important, show flow is important, making sure your speakers are important. But when you're thinking about those tech checks, you know, it's really about making sure that, you know, the lights are set up so that your face is illuminated so that people can see your micro expressions and understand and really understand.
As I'm saying this, I see that you're like well lit and you have a colorful background. And I decided that today was the black and white day, clearly, because I'm wearing black and white on my background. Black and white.
What are you trying to tell me non-verbally? I just want you to just be straight with me.
I don't know. But anyway, we just wanted to show you. So, you know, one thing you could ask your speakers is to do a speed test, right? So that then you can say, all right, no guarantee that the speed is going to be maintained, but have them do a speed test so that you know exactly what you're working with.
Yeah, and okay, so if they do the speed test, and this is, every time I work with speakers ahead of time, I always ask for this. Ask for a screenshot, or you can get,
verify.
You know, yes. Because that will tell you so much about, first of all, it makes them do it, right? And you know that they've gone through that process, but you might be able to catch problems that they aren't aware of. So just doing that little piece can help you a great deal.
All right, so let's talk about training. I think the most important thing here is to really talk to your speakers about what's going to happen and really set the stage for just the run of the show. We can't stress this enough. Over communicate, give them contact information. And there's a couple of things going on. If they don't know what to expect, they'll be nervous. If they're nervous, they're not going to be good speakers. If they know what to expect, they know who to call if they have help, and they've done kind of a practice run with you, if not the whole presentation, but at least in the platform, then they're going to be much better off because now they can focus on the content. And then again, just be very clear. Are you going to have someone in the room with you to moderate the questions? Is someone going to introduce the speaker, or are they going to do it themselves? Is someone going to close out the presentation, et cetera? And then we're going to provide you with some of this information, but KiKi's got a great checklist for tips that you can provide to your speakers related to things like headspace. Like if this was, like if we were like this,
right,
then good, right? Which we've seen a lot of that. You can see my children, but it's not good framing.
So just a word about headspace. Ahead of time, something that you can, you can look at if you have panelists, if you have several people that are on screen, really try to match the headspace between your head and the top of the frame. So I reach up like I can do something to Joanna's headspace or something.
We're pretty good, you and I.
We are. What this does visually is that the human eye looks for variation. It looks for differences, and it also looks for patterns. And whether you realize it or not, if there's a huge discrepancy between my headspace and someone else's headspace that's on there, it can actually prove to be enough of a visual distraction that it provides basically
takes away from the experience.
It takes away from the experience, but in their minds, there's this little tiny part that's saying they're not aligned, right? They're not aligned. And if you're thinking about, if you're trying to get a message across, if you're trying to create trust, if you're trying to communicate with people, and you want to visually encourage that, things like having patterns in the back in your background, not too busy, but enough where the human eye sees it. The human eye likes patterns. Our brains see that, and it says, I can trust what happens next. Seeing that little bit of headspace and that we're aligned says that we're aligned in more than just where we're sitting in the frame, that we're coordinated in our communications. And
Boy, that's a good tip. It also just, if there's 4 of you and you're all aligned, that's a beautiful experience.
It is actually. And then when you think about it later, visually, of course, it's not as distracting. It looks good when everything's aligned. So there's a reason for this. And it is tied to these visual cues. Humans are visual creatures. So.
Okay, so you've got some tips for the physical setup.
Yes. So you want to consider the frame. When you think about what is in the frame, you want to think about it like it's a picture, like, a picture in a magazine or a picture in your brochure, and think about what's included. So I was listening to someone who just a great mind, truly brilliant, and he was talking about data privacy and all of this stuff, and just his life has been storied. And Joanna, it has been amazing. He had dirty laundry piled in the background in a laundry basket, kind of overflowing. And as he's talking, I'm thinking, like, this is so distracting. Like, I want to go in and fix his room, Right. This is like, maybe he's the mad scientist, but consider what's in the frame and understand that people are going to be looking at that, whether they want to or not. A lot of people, they've been coming to, a virtual experience from their bedrooms because that's the only space in their house where they're able to get privacy, and they're able to control the noise. And, but there's something distracting about seeing a tufted headboard behind you as you're presenting, you know, and people are imagining you in bed. And so you have to be thinking about what's in my background. Is it too distracting? Is there something I can do to make sure that this story makes sense to who's watching? And in the case of the bed in the background, you know, it depends on the audience, but that's a really good argument for like when the green screen comes in, you know.
Yeah.
Another thing is that connecting to build trust. You know, getting comfortable about working with your camera is so important. One trick, and I would really suggest that you do this for a while if you have a hard time looking into the camera and not looking at yourself, is when you know that you're going to be talking to a group, post a picture of somebody that you love, somebody that you like behind you, or maybe somebody you don't like, you know, have them sort of grimacing at you in the background, but put it behind the camera so that you're looking at a face. And if you look and there's a picture there and that's that human face that you're connecting with, then it helps you to, you know, connect into the camera a little bit better so that the audience, the viewers who are watching, feel like you're looking at them and not like you're just, you know, looking at something on the screen. This is a difficult thing to do, especially if you're a moderator and you're having to look at the chat. So I understand it's not something that works 100% of the time. But if you are going to be talking to an audience for a period of time, try to do that, and that will encourage better engagement.
So KiKi, we only have a couple minutes, but the question is, do you suggest sending a background to everyone to use so there's consistency and not kitchens and studies?
Oh, haha. Okay. So yeah, what I would do is I would do an audit of everyone's background, where like take a snapshot, even if it's a picture on their phone. What is the background for where you're going to be coming from, you know, coming live from, and then look at it. And if you are dealing with kitchens and things like that, it could be a really good argument for a background. I will also say this, that the virtual backgrounds don't work as well without an actual green screen.
I know, that's why
you have to have the green screen, because otherwise you're going to have some really horrible mistakes pop up, people's body parts disappearing,
Exactly.
half of the face, you know, and that's distracting. And like we were saying before, ultimately what we're trying to do here is we're trying to teach everyone how they can better connect so that, you know, that communication isn't disrupted by noise, whether it's, you know, audible noise or a technical noise or visual noise.
Yeah, and one more question. Somebody said, hey, what's the thinking? I guess the way the experience is for somebody is they only see whoever's talking. And I think, gosh, I think that's a setting in Zoom that we probably should have asked people first to go into gallery view. So that's a good tip for us to go into gallery view before we shared out the presentation.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of those things that you can do ahead of time, is to say, hey, you know, a better viewing experience is you can actually adjust, look for these two bars.
Well, that's a good tip, because then both of us are on the screen.
Yeah.
So thank you. Hey, really quick, just here's some things, you know, put a note on the door. This when we were doing Nanduzapalooza with Terry Carden, she put this on her door and she said, I don't know, there was like the cleaning people were coming, the, you know, the mail people, you know, whatever.
Yes. And these are examples of, you know, just a run through of examples taken from real life. We get a lot of them every day, but examples of what not to do. This is an example of a background that's not working. His ear kept disappearing. The person on the right, this is somebody who we're seeing, usually if you see the seam and like where your ceiling and your wall come together, that usually means that your camera is angled up and not at a very good angle. We're seeing that his chin is cut off. We're kind of looking up at him and his face is cast in shadow.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. So
it's hard to critique Dr. Fauci, but you're about to do it.
I'm going to do it. So look, how much practice has this man had? But wait, his face is taking up the entire frame, and actually it's being cut off. He's too close to the camera. I will say this though. The man is experienced, because you can see every expression, right? You can see everything. And so he's well lit. He is well lit. But I would say that he needs to back up. He just needs to back up.
All right, so we're running out of time. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to, close this out and just say, hey, here's some tips. I think we've talked about this already. And just one thing, I think, KiKi, you really love your light ring. So let's talk about that. Yes. I have one and I haven't connected it today. Bad me.
I have several setups in my office, and I wanted to just share with you a little bit about what it looks like from this angle. So right now I'm talking to you on that corner laptop, and it's positioned so that it shows sort of the corner of my office. I have a very small office, so this is the way to give me more depth in the background. But I also have another setting that I'm able to turn and speak from my desktop. And that's usually for like just, regular meetings that I have. And I still have my ring light. Now, both of these ring lights, they're dimmable. You can adjust, they have different types of lighting settings so that you can make it, a more golden tone or bring it into a sharper, stark white tone. But you usually want to go warmer, especially if you're fair skinned, you want to warm that up a little bit. I can get overexposed and more like a vampire very easily. On the right, you'll see something that looks really bizarre. It's like, what are all of these Post-it notes? This is called bird tailing. And one thing that you can do, and this is something you can share with your presenters, is that if you know that you have an important interview, if you have an important presentation, you have certain points that you want to make, but you don't want to look at your notes the entire time. Put key elements of your presentation or what you're trying to hit on. Maybe it's certain numbers or an equation that you need to share, and you don't want to get it wrong. Put those around like a bird tail with the sticky part of the Post-it note facing on your computer around the frame. And that way you're not looking at the same place, reading off of a script or something like that, but you actually have a more natural kind of engagement and can look back at the camera and then look at a different spot and grab your fact. You just need to know where those facts are located. You can look at that and then go back to the camera. And that's just one little trick that you can teach your presenters for their virtual presentations.
That's a good tip. But we were working with somebody yesterday and she was reading the comments too much. And I said, I've seen you live and I don't think you should be reading. And she said, but I want to make sure that I hit on the 3 points. And I said, put it on a Post-it note, stick it above the camera, and make sure that you touch those, touch on those 3 points and stop reading.
Yeah, teleprompters are great. Teleprompters are fantastic. If there's a lot of content that you need to go through and you've got to get it just right, they can be amazing. But you know what? It's really hard.
You got to be like a trained politician to get it right.
And you have to be practiced. You have to work with them regularly. They have to be positioned right. So it doesn't, even trained politicians, if they're not looking directly into the camera while they're going through it, it just creates this hollow, superficial feeling. And you automatically feel disconnected. You don't feel like you're connecting. Isn't it strange the way that works?
Yeah. Hey, KiKi, we're over, but I want to make sure, and I apologize to everyone if you'll just stick with us for another 3 minutes. We want to talk about the plan B, and I'll tee this up. So anytime we do anything, a launch, an event, these days, virtual meetings, we always do a what can go wrong meeting, right? We'll do it ahead of time, we'll do it right before. And then the question is like, what can go wrong? And then what you do is you have a plan B so that if that happens, you slide into plan B. And so the big kind of thing that happens with these virtual events is that somebody's internet goes out, right? Or the same thing, someone gets sick. And so the question is, what's your plan B? And so KiKi has even suggested things like pre-record your keynote as a backup so that the day of the conference, if the keynote isn't available or his or her internet suddenly goes out, you can say, you know what, we just lost KiKi. We've got a recorded version of the keynote. It's not as good, but and then just play it. Yeah. Right. So then you're not like, oh gosh, whatever. The other thing is like, here are just a couple of other suggestions. We were doing this conference and we had the speaker and the moderator, and we had a backup speaker and a backup moderator in the green room, so that if someone's internet just suddenly like went out on them, we'd quickly just, pull someone in and they'd say, oh gosh, we just lost John. but here's Jason and he's filling in as moderator, go. And you don't have to make a big deal out of it, just keep going, right? So I think, KiKi, what you're saying is like have a plan B for all the different things that might happen.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely something where you want to go and really think through, you know, in the military, they call this red teaming, but you really want to think through everything that could go wrong, right? And plan for that because, you know, especially it seems like this year, it could. And so, you know, I promise you, and I'll tell you, my experience with association chat over the years has really taught me this because I go live every week. So I can tell you, I've had really everything, loss of power, speakers not show up, it's every technical problem you've ever imagined. I've tried different platforms, so platforms have failed me. And so having a plan B and then plan C and D is really a good idea because, and making sure other people know where to go when something goes wrong. You know, how does the speaker who gets disconnected, what are they supposed to do next? Are they okay to come back in? Are they supposed to text you, call you? Who do they call? What do they do next? These things have to be figured out ahead of time.
Hey, we had a couple of slides on how to work with your speakers to help so that they can help you promote the event. And I think our biggest tip there is ask them to promote your event, give them custom graphics, and then give them custom Google Analytics, you know, like tracking codes. Yeah. We're doing this event, and it's an award ceremony where there are 8 semifinalists, and most of the traffic is really being driven by the finalists, but in particular, 3 of them who have clearly done a very good job, and we can tell from the analytics. Yeah. So, KiKi, you have shared so much amazing information. And I always like to end our webinars with an action plan so that if people say, oh my God, there's all this content, you know, where do I go first? So here's our action plan for you. Number 1, check your speaker contracts. There was a question about, hey, if we're going to have the rights to, you know, the content afterwards, so that we can reuse it, you know, put it on the website, sell it, et cetera. I think the question, KiKi, I don't have the answer to this, is what's a reasonable percentage above the speaking fee that speakers these days are asking for? Do you know?
I don't feel comfortable actually sharing that because it's actually, I've seen quite a wide range, and it depends on the speaker, and it depends on what they're usually paid and what they're, yeah, it's a good question.
So maybe like have a private conversation with KiKi if you want to follow up. But
yeah, I can tell you what I've seen, and I can tell you who's been doing it, but I can't.
All right, fair enough. You know, number 2 is over communicate. I don't think that we can really stress this enough. I mean, a series of emails plus a training plus another training plus a practice. Do a live test with every speaker, because how can you have any confidence that these speakers actually know what they're going to do? And it will take time to do this. And you might say, oh gosh, this is a lot of work. But if these are your speakers and you want them to really be set up for success, it's so worth it to do it. Give them really tips on both the presentation, the content, but also on the platform. And then finally, really empower them to promote. Give them custom graphics, give them templates, and then tell them to go. KiKi, any last words from you?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to add to the action plan. I'm going to challenge everyone to do this one thing. Okay. You want to go with me? All right. Look at this. I want you, not to get that, but all right. I want you to, this is a stand-up laptop stand. I want you to actually challenge yourselves to try to present, and maybe just do it internally with your team, but try to get comfortable with trying some new things. Try to present a little bit while you're standing and seeing what that looks like, because I've been practicing, I've been working with different backgrounds. I've been working to see what it looks like, you know, with different types of lighting. And we all need to create a little bit more visual interest. And so this is just one more tool you can add to your toolbox. But if you're able to try to practice and adapt and learn now, you'll be better off for that in the future. And at the very least, it will give you something new to do and get you off of your rear end, where we all are spending too much time these days on these Zoom calls.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, for those of you who who have stuck with us, thank you so much. So KiKi, she'll never say it, so I'll say it. KiKi does the weekly association chat conversations. Please tune in on Facebook. KiKi also can help you train your speakers. She can do trainings for you. She can also do one-on-one with your speakers. And I'll tell you, doing a training session with KiKi, your speakers are going to feel so appreciated and so loved, because they'll feel like they really just got training from a master, which they will. So I think we've got contact information here. We will also send you this in the emails. If you have questions, if you'd like to have further conversations with us, we welcome it. KiKi, thank you so much for everything that you shared today. What a thrill to do a webinar with you. And I guess we'll sign off. Everybody, thanks so much. Have a terrific day. Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.